everything's connecting already. We're looking good for connection. So welcome to Roundtable Decision. This is a live stream of my initial thoughts of what to expect going into the presidential debates tonight. I figured I would go ahead and do this smaller type of video before my podcast, because I was going to do my podcast before the debates, but I thought that was rather a bad idea, because I want to give my insight into what actually happened during the debate. So I'm going to move my podcast back and have it probably Thursday, maybe Wednesday, for my actual podcast, where I can give all of my thoughts to what I heard during the presidential debates. So as I make sure everything is all up for me to check your comments in case anybody wants to chime in on their thoughts for what to expect or what they think. So obviously, I was thinking that these presidential debates was probably never going to happen, and that was mainly because I didn't think that Joe Biden would agree to debate Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is obviously a very bullish type of figure, and through him being the way he is, I have found it hard to believe that he would want to debate against Trump, because Trump is obviously a rather person who's not afraid to attack you personally, and we have seen Joe Biden in the past get somewhat I can't say the word, getting rather shaken up by people attacking his personal character, and that's going to be the first example I show you in today's live stream and shorter video of my initial thoughts when we get into the actual articles and the topics I want to talk about at first. So again, if you're here watching live, you can add your comments, but if you're watching the video after I finish here, I would love to know your thoughts on what you expect, or if you're watching after the debates actually happened, what you find interesting or what you took from the debates, because I am going to be doing a reaction to those videos, or to the debate on my podcast, and probably have that as a separate video on my channel as well, because I do find the debates something that many Americans do find interesting to watch, although a lot of people tend to be just set in whatever party they're a part of, so to speak. So now that we got in all the pregame stuff taken out of the way, I'll dive into my initial thoughts here. I originally was going to try to do Facebook Live as well, but I haven't been able to figure it out yet as far as that goes. So maybe eventually I'll be able to get Facebook Live working as well. But if by some chance it is working, I may not be able to see your comments because I'm not 100% sure how to do that yet. But I'm not trying to avoid you or anything like that. So now we got, again, all the pregame stuff out of the way. Like I was mentioning first, we're going to first look at a instance where Joe Biden got somewhat flastered by a personal attack. Now, Joe Biden is a very interesting guy when it comes to the debate stage, because Joe has two reactions to general things. Joe Biden, when he gets personally attacked, tends to get angry, as any human being would, because a personal attack is at you as that person, obviously. And he either has two types of reactions. He either has a reaction where he kind of breaks down and stutters over his words and doesn't really make much sense on what he tries to respond back. And that was with the instance with Kamala Harris over busing, which is kind of ironic because she is now Joe Biden's vice president. And that was one of the biggest instances where you could see Joe Biden kind of get a little bit flastered by that attack. But there's also times where Joe Biden, like when Bernie Sanders went against him on climate change, or when Cory Booker went against him on, I think it was guns or some issue like that, Joe Biden got angry with Cory Booker, or got angry with Bernie Sanders, and had more of a passionate side to the debate. I believe it was either the second or the third debate where a lot of people thought that Joe Biden won the debate hands down, because he came across as rather passionate, energetic, and not the typical older type of man figure on the debate stage. So he does have two different types of reactions when he gets attacked. And Donald Trump is most definitely going to be attacking Joe Biden personally, or attacking Joe Biden on policy issues. That is something that is almost very, very obvious when it comes to the debate stage. And Joe Biden isn't somebody that makes himself a hard target. He's someone that's rather easy to target on a lot of things due to his somewhat mental abilities going downhill. Either dementia, or we don't know the exact reason or the exact concern, but Joe Biden isn't as passionate as he was in the past due to, well, his age for the most part. And that is a very obvious issue that Donald Trump is probably going to be attacking Joe Biden off of. But Joe Biden also makes somewhat of an easy attack on himself due to his gifts or due to his mumbling of words, or due to the things he just does that are rather cringy. And I have two examples before we dive into the actual debate stage first, but I wanted to give my first thoughts and then we'll get into the articles. So after I show you these two things, I'll continue with my initial thoughts and then we'll go from there. So that was one example, but another example we have here, and I'll go ahead and play this video for you as well. But Joe Biden has known to do somewhat of cringy type of things, and just for those who are stumbling upon my channel, I try not to be super biased on what I have as personal beliefs or what I think is right compared to what you might think is right. I try to show all sides. I try to at least understand the opposite perspective. But these are just my initial thoughts about Joe Biden. And I do think that in a lot of things Joe Biden does, he leaves room for cringy type of events to happen. And one of these was in Florida when he played the song Despacito to the Latin Heritage Month, or to Latin voters that are very important in the state of Florida, as they make up a pretty decent amount of the population size. And as a demographic, both sides of the presidential race are wanting to get the votes from. God dang it. I apologize for that. Let me fix that again. I don't know what it is, but I guess maybe when I disappear, it gets on the YouTube again. Yep, there it is. Yeah, and hey, John, I see your comment there on YouTube. Hope everything is going good with your job and everything else. And your GoFundMe page as well. I saw it got mentioned on Matt Christensen's show, so that was kind of bizarre in that way. I never expected to see something like that, even if it's something more personal towards what's happening with you now. But anyway, but let me see if we can restart this video here for you. But as I was mentioning earlier, before we had the breakdown there in content, he played this Despacito song in Florida, as we'll see here.
I just have one thing to say. I'll tell you what, if I had the talent of any one of these people, I'd be elected president by acclamation.
So yeah, that was just a short video clip of what Joe Biden did there in Florida, with a little bit of a reaction from this YouTube channel here that I pulled it from. But even though we only played like 5, maybe 10 seconds tops of this song, it just came across as rather cringy to even the Latin voters that live in Florida, are just Latino people in general. As on my last podcast, I talked a little bit about him doing so, and there were several tweets of Latino people who found it not necessarily as offensive, but rather something that they just saw right through, and they saw exactly what Joe Biden was trying to do through to playing that song, and that is just pandering to that specific type of voter. And that, although you could argue that you shouldn't put that much interest into it, or you shouldn't give that much attention to something that's silly, Joe Biden was just doing it for fun, for giggles, or whatever else you might want to say, and he's not pandering. You could argue at that point, and obviously people may just be thinking too much into it because it is a presidential race and everything like that. But at the same time, it's going to give a good attack point for Donald Trump through his Twitter or even on the debate stage tonight, against Joe Biden. And Joe Biden hasn't just done that as an example. We have the famous example where he's basically quoted, "You ain't black if you're not voting for Joe Biden," or his comments about white kids and poor kids, and talking about black kids in that reference, and other examples. And it's made a classic example for Joe Biden to use in his ad campaigns through the Donald Trump channel. And I'm just going to pull a few examples from that, because obviously you can just play these videos themselves with no extra comments or commentary, and you'll be able to understand why Donald Trump could be taking advantage of some of these situations.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black, poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
It's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful.
I would have to ask black voters the question, like, why do the old white men, who have the most racist legislation toward black people, why are they, the top two front runners when it comes to black support? Joe Biden and
So obviously he had a few bit of his own political agenda through the black candidate, or not candidate, but black celebrity on the CNN show there for the last example. But really I played the video just to show the two examples that I also briefly mentioned. So Joe Biden does leave grounds for attack outside of just his political policies. And you could say the same for Donald Trump. And we know all of the attacks that Joe Biden is probably going to use against Donald Trump because, well, mass media in general already attacks Donald Trump based off of those issues. So before I get into the main articles, I make sure I haven't missed anyone's comments here for the live video. And we'll go from there. So we're looking good on all that. I see someone on Twitch, and hello, Sagittarius. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm terrible with names, so I appreciate you watching. And John says, yeah, it was really nice of him to mention it. Yeah, it was. I just thought that was very, very good of Matt Christian on his main show on his main show there. So this is by NPR, and it basically just gives 6 questions ahead of the presidential race. And now, real quick before I just dive into the article and discuss fully, the debate stage and debate questions are something that in general the candidates get to know beforehand, and some people have argued about that. There was a lot of controversy on Hillary Clinton being able to know the questions fully and basically write out her answers before the debate stage, and that was something a lot of people did not like or appreciate at all, for that matter. And but long story short, I don't think that these questions are a complete surprise to either candidate by any means. And I don't know if that necessarily makes that big of a difference. But I was trying to think of what type of questions is the debate going to be over. And obviously one of the big topics is going to be coronavirus. And another big topic is going to be riots and protest. But then you have your other, like, outside the main circle topics that I think that could be discussed on a normal debate, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to be discussed on this debate stage, and that is an issue like climate change. Now, obviously, if you're a very leftist type of candidate or very leftist type of voter, you might see climate change as being a concern up there with coronavirus legislation, or with protesting and how to limit the amount of protest, or how to completely get rid of systemic racism, or whatever broad topic you want to say there. But most of the people, or most American people, I don't think will see climate change as up there with what's happening right now through coronavirus, or through protesting, and how to limit protest, or how to limit legislation, or provide more legislation depending on what side of the debate stage you're for, or which candidate you're for that matter. And NPR is basically talking about when the debate is, and it's moderated by Fox News and Chris Wallace, and it's going to start at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which is not the one true time zone. 8 Central Time is the time zone. I just want to make that 100% clear. Central Time is the better time zone. Now that we got that out of the way, we know who's moderating, and a lot of people have talked about that the moderator for this debate, or for the presidential debates in general, is somebody that's going to matter a lot, and somebody that's going to have to make sure that they are able to tame both candidates, or keep both candidates relatively civil at each other. And I don't know if necessarily that's going to be 100% true, if that's going to happen, as we'll see later on here. But the first question they have is, can Trump avoid the sitting presidential first debate slump? And it talks about how most presidents in their first debate stage have a little bit of a slump through voters or through other things. And basically that's because the other candidate might become more popular at attacking what the previous president did through legislation. And we all know a lot of these attack points that Joe Biden is going to use. If you believe polling, and you believe that polling does represent people's thoughts, or represents in general debate, general issues, if you believe that polling issues is 100% right, or at least more right than it's wrong, then most people would say that Joe Biden would have handled coronavirus better, or is handling coronavirus better. And that's something that Joe Biden could use for this debate stage in attacking Donald Trump. Because in general, a lot of people don't necessarily like what Donald Trump has done, and a lot of things have led to riots and through autonomous zone in Seattle, because Donald Trump has given all decisions up to governors. So a lot of people liked that he took more of a liberal approach, even though I used liberal in quotations there, at letting the individual governors of their state, or of their city, or of their county, or of whatever you want to break down from, make decisions based off of their science, based off of their doctors, based off of their beliefs in how to handle their part better than a whole nationwide stance on the issue. And a lot of things that Donald Trump has done and said in press conferences have also been backed up by the CDC, or haven't been backed up by the CDC. So the CDC does have a big role on how coronavirus and how people view the handling of coronavirus. The second one here is, does Biden come across I don't know why I can't read. Does Biden come across as sane? That is not what the article put there, but I'm losing my mind right now, so we'll continue. And basically the whole point is Biden going to come across as somebody that has it all together, or is Biden going to come across as losing his thoughts, or losing his interest, or stumbling over words, mumbling over words, not making much sense in what he says, and all this other things? And I've mentioned that at the very beginning of my personal thoughts on what to expect for the debate stage. If Joe Biden has a performance like he had, I believe, on the third debate, I do think that he'll come across as somebody that does have his thoughts together more than his thoughts not together, and somebody that in general had a good performance on the debate stage, although he's going up against Donald Trump. And it is something we need to take into account, because Donald Trump is not afraid to go and attack your personal character, or your stances, or whatever else you might want to say. Donald Trump is going to be a lot more aggressive than anybody was on the Democratic debate stage. The third question, can Trump and Biden control their tempers and tone? Now, this is the biggest question I think they have on this 4-question articles going into the debate, or 4 topics that they're looking out for. And this is the one I think is most interesting for the average viewer when stumbling upon the the presidential debate. Because you have different type of viewers who are going to stumble on and watch the presidential debates. You have your average American that's watching the debate just to know kind of what the candidates are talking about. But the real bigger group, I would argue, are people that follow politics and follow the candidates. You obviously have your pro MAGA hat wearing Trumpers, and you have the Joe Biden people, who I think the large part of his base are people that believe that by voting for Joe Biden, you're voting to bring back normalcy, or bring back less violence, less protests, because Joe Biden is a more stable candidate than Donald Trump. I think that's a large part of Joe Biden's voting base. So you obviously have your big supporters of both parties, and they're going to be watching, but you also have the people that are going to be watching to see what sort of political theater is going to happen on the debate stage. And I do think that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are very likely to at least raise their tone or lose their temper on the debate stage, because the personal attacks I do think are going to happen rather often than not. I would be rather surprised if after watching the debate tonight, if we come across and read articles or watch YouTube videos of people reacting to debates that said that both candidates were very civil, very tone. It was a very high school type of debate more than a angry YouTube debate type of commentary between two commentaries. The fourth one is, how does Trump defend his record? And this is one I do think a lot of people are going to argue for the debate. People who are Joe Bideners are for people that believe Joe Biden would make a better president. Because Trump has obviously not done everything 100% right. And the mass media has made it very obvious to anything Trump has done to go against. So Joe Biden does have a lot of talking points and a lot of stats, a lot of articles, a lot of support going his direction to attack Donald Trump's record and personal stances that he has had. And then the fifth and sixth ones are, how is the moderator going to control the stage, and how does Biden respond to personal attacks? And since we already talked about those questions, I'll go ahead and move on to this next article here, where we will be talking and going from there. But real quick, I'll check comments again, just to make sure we're not missing anything real quick. Joe says, if Central Time is the one true time zone, then why is it taking place at 8 p.m. Eastern Time? Checkmate. I'll comment on that real quick, but Amazing Music just donated 1 lemon on DLive. I appreciate that, Amazing Lemon. Thank you very much. And we'll go here, and Sagittarius says, yes, no problem. I am sad the debate is too late in my country. Well, yeah, you might be able to watch some recap videos. I know I'm going to be doing a recap video myself, so you'll probably be able to watch that. But YouTube is going to be full of reaction videos to the debate. But then again, it's always good to catch those type of events live rather than hearing a perspective after the hand. So I do understand that as a perspective. And just before John thinks he won the argument, the reason the article is written in Eastern Time is because it was written by NPR, and we all know NPR, so I think I have that argument won pretty easily there. Next one, The Hill. Why the 2020 presidential debate will matter more than any in recent memory. So one of the big talking points, and I'm not going to be reading the articles too much like I usually do on my podcast, for example, but anyway, that's kind of besides the point. One of the major points about the presidential debate is a lot of people are arguing that this is the most important election. This is the most important presidential race in modern history for the president, or at least in modern history. And I do think that some people have a stance to believe that and have a valid right to do so because, we don't know if this is necessarily going to happen for sure, but the election of another Supreme Court justice, who we now have by name, is very important. If they do get approved before Donald Trump, before the election, restart. The issue of the Supreme Court justice is a rather interesting topic because it supports both type of candidates and both type of voter bases, and you can argue which one is going to come out more because of it, but you're using a leftist icon in Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you're replacing her with another woman who is much more moderate than Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but still leans very conservative, especially on her abortion stance for the Supreme Court, and Roe v. Wade would likely be overturned if she does get passed for the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court being a major issue is something that's going to make this debate stage a very, very important. And now there's debate on if that's even going to matter, because there is potential that the Supreme Court justice does get voted in before the election happens. And if that's the case, then it does lose a very valuable part into making this the most historic presidential race. But at the same time, it may not matter that much, because I would argue in general, if you're somebody that's against Trump, you are not going to want Trump, obviously. And if you're somebody that is a Trump voter, then you're going to want to see Trump stay. It's a lot of like a hero type of story in what I think. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is a hero. I don't like Donald Trump very much at all. And this presidential race, like the last presidential race, isn't somebody that is that great and I'm going to go to the voter proof and say, yes, he's my guy 100%. It's not that at all. And I think a lot of Americans are feeling that way. It's rather a vote for the lesser of two evils. And in the last presidential race, a lot of people thought the lesser of two evils was Donald Trump compared to the evil Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump, I think, got a lot of voters just based off of that fact alone. But that's besides the point. I do think that the race is very important regardless the side you're on, because if Trump does win another 4 years, the media is going to lose their minds, because they've already basically written every negative article against Trump that exists for what he's done. And some of those articles Trump did deserve in his policies or maybe what he said, even though freedom of speech does exist. So I do think that this presidential race, especially the way the media is covering it, is a very historic race compared to any other race out there. But I'll read a little bit of the article here. The main reason that 2020 debates could be the most quintessential general election debates of any in recent decades is because of the extreme prevent defense played by the Biden campaign. Biden has barely taken any questions from the press or Saturday for interviews with the media. His running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, has yet to take a single question from the media in a press conference in the 3 days after the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Biden called an intimate lid on the 2 of 3 days, meaning there has no campaign activity at all. In fact, the Biden campaign has done that 36% of the days in September. When Biden has spoken to the press, has often been excessive on specifics instead of getting meta about what it would mean to answer the specific questions being asked of him. Beginning with the Fox Chris Wallace on Tuesday and continuing with the C-SPAN Steve Scully and NBC Kristen Welker, the debate moderators have a responsibility to get precise answers from the Democratic nominee, rather than focus on hypotheticals about the Biden would have done differently than Trump during the pandemic. The media members tasked with the important job of debate moderator should push Biden on how govern if elected, if enough to say he would do more to combat climate change. With the current administration, he would adopt the Green New Deal. And then it talks about how Trump is going to go into the debate stage. But I do think the person what has to prove it the most in this debate stage is Joe Biden compared to Donald Trump. Because I do think that Donald Trump, well, this may be a little bit of my own personal bias when saying this, but I do think Donald Trump is more excited to go into the debate stage and is somebody I'm not necessarily scared of having a bad performance compared to somebody like Joe Biden, who I do think has an opportunity to have a bad performance and is someone that has to prove why you should vote for him instead of voting for the incumbent. It's similar to running for an election where you're already a sitting member of that seat. You have more of a chance to win because people know who you are and are simply just wanting to vote for that person again. And Donald Trump may not have as much of that going around this time due to the type of person he is, but at the same time it is a concern that should be taken into account. And Sagittarius here and Twitch says, in France, the majority of people are scared about the fact that Trump wins again, but on another side, they are not sure Biden will do better, surely because no one really knows him. And that's that is a very good point you have there, Sagittarius. One of the big things about Joe Biden and what the article mentioned on as well is what he's been doing as a policy, and it was nicknamed Basement Biden. And I do think Basement Biden has a good ring to it and is something that is truthful for Biden's campaign, because we do know, as I've said numerous times already in this video, Biden does have some sort of mental condition or something that's making what he says either slurred or stumbling over words or just not really being able to understand what he says 100% of the time. So instead of sending them out to speak in front of the public always like Donald Trump has to do. They've kept them in the back and kind of hidden. And it's been an approach that I think has worked, because in general I would say that Joe Biden's campaign has been mass media sources like CNN and others, and CNN is not the only one to do this, who are being a mouthpiece for what Joe Biden stands for, or why you should vote for Joe Biden instead of Joe Biden and what he actually says. And for your first comment about foreign countries, foreign countries always have a certain perspective of the candidate. I kind of compare it to Boris Johnson, and this is only for what I've heard through my dad in a business trip or through British people that I know him from a high school or whatever else. But they basically said that Boris Johnson is a very similar figure to Donald Trump, and that some people in that actual state or not state but country like Boris Johnson or like a Donald Trump, but the coverage of them outside everywhere else is always negative, and it's always negative here in the United States too. So Donald Trump does have a very negative reputation if you were to just know him by articles and by mass media. His article by CNN states, Biden and Trump prepare for a debate that could turn personal. Inside the map room of the White House, a small group of adversaries sat around a table and prepared the president with accusations and criticism about everything from lying to incompetence. Excuse me. The team, led by former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, was getting Donald Trump prepared for an onslaught they expect from Joe Biden on the debate stage Tuesday night, about 100 miles in Wilmington, Delaware. For two very different men with polar opposite temperaments and diverse governing policies, their debate objects have some fundamental things in common: put their opponent on defense and make much a rearm on other as possible. In conversations with multiple sources familiar with both candidates, perhaps each is practicing ways to get under the other's skin, while also avoiding blowing up and going off the script if the debate turns personal. Advisors to both candidates are expecting one of the night's biggest flashpoints to be about each man's children. CNN is told that Trump is preparing to go after Hunter Biden for getting lucrative jobs overseas when his father was vice president, that he will say the younger Biden was not qualified for. Trump and his allies have repeatedly made unfounded and false claims to allege that the former vice president and his son acted corruptly in Ukraine. And it is a point to argue from. I don't think that you can state that and simply it be true or it simply be false. Like I've said many a times on my videos, most of the time if you read a CNN and a Fox article about the same issue, whatever is in the middle is most often right. And that's with a lot of issues in general and not just with politics. Whatever's in the middle of a debate, of a personal attack or a argument, is probably the one that is most often right, or is more right than more wrong. And that's a very good way to approach topics. But I do think that both candidates are going to attack each other off of their children, and that's why I wanted to read this article to give that perspective as well, because we do know that Joe Biden does defend Hunter Biden and can get very angry when people go against Hunter Biden and against him as the vice president at the time for being corrupt, or for at least alleging corruption in Ukraine. And anytime as a politician you're called corrupt, that's something that you want to make sure you come across as not being corrupt. So basically, long story short, Joe Biden has to come across and have a good stance when Hunter Biden does get dragged in to the presidential race, or towards the presidential debate, because it is going to happen. But Trump does have his criticisms along his family as well. According to, I believe it was an aunt, if I remember right, in his past, that basically went against Trump through one of his family members who passed away. I can't remember the exact details about how all that happened, but I do remember that being a story not too long ago with Donald Trump, and not even his own family doesn't necessarily like Trump that much. Now, this last article is by 538, and it's going to be interesting after the debate and after 538 gets some polling results from it, and if a change of voter support for either candidate happens after the debate. As it states here, will the first presidential debate shake up the race? And this is again by 538. Sarah? Sarah says, we have been staying for a while now, and we are in the thick of the presidential election. Today, though, marks America's first real opportunity to see President Trump and Joe Biden go head-to-head in the first of 3 scheduled presidential debates. The candidates are expected to stick to 6 topics: the Trump and Biden records, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, the economy, race and violence in our cities, and the integrity of the election. The reality going into tonight is Donald Trump is fairly behind Joe Biden in the polls, and has been there for a while now. According to our forecast, he still has a very real chance of winning, but he is the underdog. So let's start there. Given that Biden is ahead and has been all cycle, does he have more to lose tonight or no? Sarah, I disagree. And this is by Nathaniel. Yeah, Sarah, I think that's right. We shouldn't overthink this. As long as everyone stays the way it's going to been going, that's good for Biden. The debates, though, represent a change for the status quo to be disrupted, and then it gives some results of past elections and after the debate on if there was any change. And in general, there's a decline of support from the incumbent candidate to the person that's been against the incumbent. Basically, whoever's going against the president has usually more of a higher chance to win at least the first debate, because he's able to attack what that previous candidate has done. And in general, people may not like that previous candidate and all of his points, because in the debate they're going to bring up the worst parts, or at least the worst parts that party sees that past presidential candidate as doing. And it says here, Sarah, say more about that. Why not? Because Biden already has such a sizable lead nationally. Nathaniel, for one thing, there has been a very few undecided voters this year. For another, I don't think Trump has some aurora of inconsistency around him. He's pretty unpopular. Not to mention, both Democrats and Republicans are solidly behind their candidate this year, so there's less room for party numbers to come home to the base. I will also point out the first presidential debate in 2016 actually seemed to help Hillary Clinton, who was a member of the incumbent party. Clinton led our national polling by 1.4 points on the first day of the presidential debate. And again, that's somewhat odd, because usually the candidate that isn't the incumbent wins that presidential, or at least wins that first debate stage. But then again, that's not always the case, as it's said there. And it goes on to talk a little bit more about what to expect from polling, but I didn't want to get too dragged down just on polling. I just more wanted to talk about and bring up that question on if the first presidential debate, the first presidential debate will shake up numbers for people who are voting. So before I end today's video, I'll give you a quick chance to say your last comments here for those who are watching live. But if you want to talk about general thoughts here for going into debate, as I've already kind of said, I will be making a reaction to the presidential debate, so don't be afraid on that. But I want to read Secretarius's comment real quick. Daniel questions, but for who is going to win? Yeah, I guess I could end the video at that. That would be a good point to end today's video on, actually. That's pretty good. But real quick before I end, make sure to go ahead and follow if you haven't followed on wherever you're watching now, on YouTube, DLive, or Twitch. Hit the like button and subscribe. That does still seem very weird to say. I'm not too much of a fan of that. Anyway, but I'll give my quick thoughts with Sagittarius' comment on who I think is going to win the election. I think in general, the person who's going to win this, or not win an election, but is going to win the presidential debate, the person I think is going to win this presidential race is Donald Trump. And I think that the reason I say that is, I don't know if I trust Joe Biden coming into this race and his debate strategy and what he's been able to do in the past here. Joe Biden is, I don't trust his mental ability to go against Trump, because Trump is a very bullish figure and somebody that's not afraid to just fully go and attack you. And I don't know if Joe Biden has enough stamina or enough support around him, or whatever else you want to say, to go against that much fire that's going to be against him. And it's definitely going to be that way. So I guess my vote for who I think is going to win this presidential debate is Donald Trump, just on the fact of I don't necessarily believe Joe Biden is going to have a strong performance. Now, who do I think is going to win based off of policy or based off of arguments? I think that is very hard to say, because I do think that is going to be very personal type of attacks. I just don't see this debate being based 100% off of policy than being based off of just attacks in general. So until I watch the debate, it'll be hard to see that happening. But I see Sagittarius says here, strangely, I don't see Biden to win, even the election. Yeah, I don't necessarily see Biden winning the election either, if I'm being 100% honest. I do think that it's hard to tell who exactly is in the lead, because Donald Trump has given many opportunities for Biden or for voters here in America to go against him in many perspectives. But at the same time, I don't know if Joe Biden has enough general support to win an election, either because of his health conditions or if he just... It's hard to vote for someone you don't even see, and that is with the basement Biden type of approach. I don't know if he's just somebody that's going to get a lot of votes based off of who he is, based off of just his character. But at the same time, like I've said before, I do think a lot of his voter crowd is somebody that's voting for Joe Biden just because he's somebody they think is going to have a return to normalcy compared to everybody else. And Sagittarius says here's, I have literally no political argument, just feelings. And yeah, that's a big point too. I don't think that anybody is 100% politically smart in picking a candidate. Basically what I mean by that is I don't think that the president is somebody that is going to any political person that's watching politics now and trying to recap or trying to predict the future and says that this person's going to win outright is rather fooling themselves, because as we've known from past polling, especially in the last election, it is not always truthful, and that's something that should be taken into account. So again, thank you for watching this video. I'm going to be signing off here. I appreciate all of your comments on Twitch with Sagittarius, and I appreciate John from the Generational Gap there on YouTube, and for the Lemon on DLive with the amazing music. Again, I appreciate everybody here. I hope you'll watch the recap or any more of my videos here in the future, and I'll sign off here, and thank you. Oh, wrong one.